In this video we're going to look at stopper knots. Its true name is a double overhand stopper, Ashley's Book of Knots, knot 516. It's a suitable knot to put in the ends of our SRT ropes we're abseiling on, just to prevent us accidentally coming off the end of a short rope or lowering someone off the end of a short rope. It's a very secure, very compact knot, quite easy to tie with a bit of practice. There's two ways of forming the knot. The first way I'll show you is probably the easiest to learn initially. The second way is probably more useful when we use the knots in other contexts other than just in the end of a single rope. The first method just starts with an overhand knot. So we start with a loop, take the tail through, and we end up with this shape. If I pull that tight, you can see the little overhand knot, probably the first knot most people learn when they're growing up. That's not very secure in the end of a rope, though. We want a bit more friction in a knot. So if I just go back a stage, so to make this into a double overhand, I just take my tail and I go around one more time. So you end up with a double spiral here. And if I now pull the tails apart, cinch this down, I end up with my double overhand stopper knot. So a couple of wraps on one face and what looks like a squashed cross on the other face. I'll show you that again. Round, this is making a single overhand, round again with the tail through to make the double overhand, and then pull that together, press it down to make your double overhand stopper. Nice easy way to learn to tie that knot. A perfectly appropriate way of tying it for use in the end of a rope to prevent accidentally abseiling off short ropes. The second method, possibly a bit more useful, we form the knot kind of in the hand by wrapping it around our finger, so we're creating a spiral. So if I just start by bringing the rope around itself. Now again, if I went straight through, I'd end up with my overhand. I don't want to do that, so if I go around a second time and then take the tail through the centre of those wraps, pull the strands tight, and you can see we end up with the same knot there. Squash cross, a couple of wraps at the back. Again. So it's often useful to use your thumb as a guide. So turn the rope around, thumb, around again, and then where your thumb is, that's where the end of the rope passes through. And then cinch it down tight to that recognisable shape. So we do use these double overhand stoppers tied around other bits of rope. I'll show you why in a minute if I just bring in a different colour rope so you can see. So if I want to stopper this around another strand of rope, then I'm going to use the same twisting method, method 2, and just make sure that the other piece of rope stays in the centre. So if I take that around the back to begin with, cross it over itself, I'm going to go around again, making sure that I keep the other rope inside, and then I'm going to take the tail through the centre, and you can see there how it's caught the other rope inside. If I just pull the other rope out of the way, you can see it's exactly the same double overhand stopper that we had before. Squash cross, 2 wraps on the back. So why do we need to know how to wrap it around another rope? Well, I can use the stopper knot to join 2 ropes together. That's one method. If I take my first rope and wrap it round the other rope, turn, twice around and then out through the centre. Set that one tight. And then if I do the same thing with my other rope on the other side, around, cross it back, around, cross it back, tail up the centre. Set that one tight. And for a rope join, we can now pull these so they sit tightly together. So that's known as a double fisherman's bend, but it's essentially a stopper knot and a stopper knot tied in opposite directions on the other piece of rope so that when they're pulled they cinch together. Okay. It's an incredibly secure way of joining two ropes together, but it can be very, very hard to undo. So perhaps a more common use for the stopper knot around another thread of rope is to back up or secure a bowline. So if we take our rope, and I'll just make a quick bowline here, give ourselves plenty of tail to work with. Okay. So there's our bowline, very handy for tying around trees or tubes, but on its own it can easily loosen and become distorted. So we would always use these with a stopper knot on the tail. So if I just tied a stopper knot on the tail to stop it sucking in, that's one way, but to be honest it's not the most secure way of doing it. It's far better to actually tie the stopper around that part of the bowline loop to really secure it. So just like we did a moment ago with the orange rope, I'm going to wrap this over the other strand, round, cross it over, again round, cross it over, and then we take the tail up through the centre of those wraps, those turns, and pull it tight, making sure that sits snug up against the back of the bowline or the other knot there. So again, it's the same double overhand stopper, just tied around another piece of rope. Show you that again. It's useful to use your thumb as a guide, and then the tail occupies the place where your thumb was. As with all knots, ensure we dress them down tightly by hand, and when backing up something like a bowline, make sure it sits right up against the other knot. If we leave space here, then we have perhaps a false loop to clip to, or perhaps more importantly, it's not actually jamming up against the bowline, so it can still loosen off. Okay, when that's tightly set up against the other knot, that's much more secure and robust. So those two methods again for tying a stopper knot. Method one. Method two. Squash across, two strands around the back, hand tight, nice and compact. Make sure there's at least a hand's worth of tail on any knot, and there you have it.